now that the entire health industry is pivoting towards preventive care, something has to be done. The scope of a fitness professional is actually huge. I mean, I've been in the industry for 18 years. Until today, I'm still learning.
Welcome to the Move Well, Live More podcast, where we discuss topics from exercise and nutrition to health and lifestyle tips for your overall quality of life.
Hey movers, welcome to our Table Talk series where we share some insights of health, fitness and lifestyle through the lens of a fitness professional. Going with the theme of bridging the gap between healthcare and fitness professionals, where we try to explore the why and how we can bridge the relationship between both pillars of the Healthcare Alliance to improve the overall quality of service for our patients or clients. Joining us today is a good friend of mine, a sports medicine physician, a strength coach, and a powerlifter. Dr. Arvin Raj, welcome to Move.
Hey, thanks, man. Thanks for having me.
Before we start, going just off the theme of bridging the gap between healthcare and fitness professionals, what's your first thought?
I would say that this is a huge gap that is yet to be filled. And with that being said, I think that's a huge opportunity because it's never been done. So when it's never been done, that means we become pioneers. And that allows us to, you have immense amount of, opportunities to do whatever you feel like doing because there's never been one. I feel like, this is a good step forward for us to actually start doing something that actually is best for our clients / patients.
So healthcare and fitness professionals are seemingly very isolated. Trust between the two is not quite established. And as a practitioner of both, within the healthcare and fitness, why do you think the trust between the two isn't solidified?
I feel the first thing that we have to actually address is there's never been a relationship to start off with. Okay, when you have no relationship to start off with, it's like we are from two different continents, two different countries, which have never met, never spoken to each other about, and we've known about each other, just never decided to communicate with each other. So I think the distance is because that bond was never established to start off with. As doctors, like we have allied health as well. We have physiotherapists, we have occupational therapists that works within the same center, within the same hospital and so on and so forth. But you see that even with them, it's more of a touch and go basis. We know they exist. We refer our patients to them, but it's not necessary that we actually go down to and talk to them about what's happening. Unless I have a physiotherapist that's attached to me, I will not know anybody else because there's never been a time that I need to go down there and actually talk to them. And so trainers, you're even further. You're even not even in our compound. There was never a need for us to go and talk to them until probably now that the entire health industry is pivoting towards preventive care. We've spoken about it a lot in the past, but now we realize that it has to be done. Something has to be done. And with that being said, this gap has still not been filled up yet. The bond between the two, the entire trainers community and us as healthcare professionals. So I think the reason why it has never happened, because until now, no one has actually made a step to do anything about it.
So it's just two separate pillars, independent of each other,
Correct.
Just never a bridge between the two. I'd like to add a little bit from at least perspective of what I see as representative of fitness professionals. The way I like to see it is if I were to put things in two separate buckets, okay? So in bucket A itself, I have a group of fitness professionals that are unaware about how movement or any form of resistance-based movements can benefit a client anything more than just the movement itself, like getting stronger and etc. Or it's a quintessential part. It's an important part for a meaningful weight loss or fat loss journey. But beyond that, any other factors such as metabolic diseases and etc., we know that it can help some way or another, but we might not have the capacity to articulate it or convey across. And then in bucket B itself, you have trainers who are completely aware of what movements can do and how it benefits, and they too have the capacity to convey across the spectrum. And personally, I think those within the bucket B itself, the latter, have the capacity to do so. At least they are more comfortable to reach out to a healthcare professional and say, all right, I have a client that's working with me, and he's also seeing you for so-and-so reasons. how can we work together to make sure that they get the best treatment or care. Through a fitness professional lens, there are two groups of people, two groups of coaches, one that will engage because they can, and one that even if they want to, they don't know. What are your thoughts about that?
In the era we are in right now, you probably have to be in bucket B. Information is readily available. It's not like back in the days where YouTube didn't exist, IG didn't exist, TikTok didn't exist. Information is abundant. Information is everywhere. With that being said, the fifth horseman of all bad things is there too, misinformation. So you have all the things there's abundance of information, but now the issue here is people don't take the time to sieve through this information. Everybody just absorbs whatever they look, because it's all just scrolling your screen. You're scrolling your screen and listening to what someone says. And if someone has a doctor title or a coach title, you think that whatever they say is the biblical truth, which is not the fact actually. A lot of people out there, even doctors, sadly speaking, are also spreading misinformation, especially when you're speaking out of what your expertise is. Likewise, you'll never see me talking about gynecological problems as if I'm the expert, simply because I'm not. I've learned it, but that doesn't make me an expert. But with the fitness professionals, if you're not someone who is actually at least well-versed in what you are supposed to know, how are you going to be able to convey information pertaining to your particular field? So if you're going to be a fitness professional who's not very well informed, basically most of your information is more of hearsay, whatever you learned from the past, you become someone who is probably from the dinosaur ages, teaching things which do not exist anymore or already is outdated. But if you're in bucket B, you also have to be one of those fitness professionals that knows how to be able to convey the message you want to convey to your clients without overburdening them with, more like a show. Like trying to, showboating that you know a lot of things. Because, it's interesting that you know all these facts, but your client needs to know a certain number of facts. Same thing when you go to a doctor. I do not list to you the 15 side effects there is with paracetamol. I'll probably tell you the most important ones. Because the rest doesn't make a difference. If it does, it's so minute, we probably see 1 in a million people, So I'm more likely to tell you things which are more common, things are very important to you, and things that you need to know for the day. So likewise, as a trainer, I think knowing things is important, knowing to convey things is important, but worse still, if you don't know any of that and you be one of those people who is comfortable not knowing that, that is dangerous if you ask me.
I'm going to circle back to when you mentioned about sometimes even doctors that you work alongside with, they too might not be communicative or at times might not be giving the right information to their patients. A few of our coaches here have actually submitted to me that it is common for our clients to convey that at any time after they've had a bout of injury or signs of pain, and after seeking their help from their attending physician, they are advised against any form of resistance movements or any form of movements altogether. But in truth, we recognize that they can, in actuality, they can do those said movements, of course, sometimes with much lesser range of motion or the ability to exert force. But the difficulty that arises during the start was when we try to convey to them that, hey, it's actually okay for us to start some form of movements for you and to get rid of that sort of that fear of movement that is somehow being instilled with them. So I'd like to ask you, in your opinion, those advices that was given to them, like, all right, you should rest completely, a complete passive rest, was it given solely based off a limiting belief, or is it more of a professional experience that's actually dictating that advice given to that patient or client?
Okay, let me start by saying this. When it comes to MSK rehabilitation, musculoskeletal rehabilitation, and preventive care and so on and so forth, our knowledge as physicians prior to becoming doctors as in medical school is very limited. Okay, I learn anatomy, I learn physiology. We don't learn exercise. Nowhere in your syllabus is exercise. If we understand what happens during an injury and what happens during the healing process of an injury, but putting those two together, where you from the point of injury to the point of healing, how this happens, how can you facilitate it, we only know probably a part of the answer. Of course, rest is part of the treatment, but using it in excess has become detrimental. And the thing is, majority of your doctors are not sports physicians. Like for instance, if you get an ankle injury and you end up seeing a general physician, that person's knowledge on musculoskeletal injuries is going to be very limited because their scope of practice covers from flus all the way to antenatal care and including MSK injuries, which is very wide. It's like going to a restaurant which has a gazillion things on the menu and you're not sure whether they're good at any one of it. That is the same thing that happens when you go to a doctor. If you have a gynecological problem, you're better off going to a gynecologist, not going to a general physician expecting perfect gynecological advice. So likewise for musculoskeletal injuries. If you have a knee injury, and if you go to a general physician, they're going to tell you whatever they know. And trust me, the safest advice to give is rest. Because you can't be taken to court for telling someone to rest. But if I told you to do something and something goes wrong, then you're more likely to end up in court. So they'll give you the safest advice there is. Albeit it could be wrong. Or not the most accurate advice. But it prevents them from getting to court. But if you go to a sports physician or a rehab physician who has experience in musculoskeletal injuries, then your chances of getting a phasic treatment comes in. That means if you see me, I'm more likely to tell you, no, you got to just rest for 3 days and then you got to start moving. On day 4, you got to start moving as tolerated and then you'll escalate it as it goes. So likewise, as a trainer, you know that you can regress and progress any exercise based on what is required at that particular point. So if your client has a knee injury, okay, or a rectus femoris tear, you know you can regress the squat to probably a partial squat and a person will be able to do it. You probably have to avoid some exercises. You still can do some exercises because the injury is not the entire limb. It's just one part of the limb, one tiny part of the limb, you know. So you can regress the program because you have the knowledge. But likewise, if I told you to give me medical advice based on your very little knowledge of how to treat a flu, you know, you will tell me what you know and that's about it. But if I ask you anything beyond that, you wouldn't know. You'll tell me what is the safest thing you've learned, but nothing beyond that. So likewise, if you're going for an injury, I would suggest always going to someone who knows their art, who knows their knowledge, who knows what they're talking about. So that would be probably the reason. So their limited knowledge is what causing all this problem.
Now, going back between the relationship between healthcare and fitness professionals, it is quite uncommon for a healthcare professional to recommend movement as a form of preventive care measure, and vice versa, a personal trainer to refer out or to seek additional help whenever a situation arises. Perhaps it is because of what we mentioned earlier, like, the bond wasn't there, the trust wasn't built. Could there be any other underlying reasons as to why the two isn't communicating?
Okay, let's start with, before someone becomes a doctor, okay, like before I became a doctor, it took me 5 whole years of proper learning before I even got my degree. Then a further 4 years of learning before I became a specialist. That's 9 years of studying. The training industry, frankly speaking, how many of us are actually qualified? How many of us are qualified trainers? They have this saying, tepuk dada tanya selera. So you got to ask yourself, how many of us in our fitness industry are truly professionals? A professional means you're backed up by something. You're backed up by an institution that's qualified to actually give you that certification. Here you go. You are a trainer now. Because much like any other allied health professional, you don't see a physiotherapist walking around with no certification. You don't see a chiropractor walking around with no certification. So why are trainers any different? So why are you cheapening yourself? And the thing is, some of them have the cheek to actually charge clients $150, $300 with no qualification. So as a doctor, will I trust someone like you? If you are unqualified, how am I to trust you? Because whenever I'm recommending someone, so for instance, I'm recommending a client or patient of mine to you. I've got a good trainer that I know, is very well qualified. So basically my word is going to be used to channel that client to you. Exactly. So that trust is there because I know you're a qualified trainer. So I'm very sure you'll do what you're supposed to do without hurting my client further. But is that the entire industry? No, it's not. But the various amount of injuries we had in this industry is because of unqualified trainers giving advices that is probably outdated, dangerous, and they have no accountability. You can't be sued. It's not going to be that easy, unlike suing someone like me, because I'm board certified. So I'm accountable for everything that I say, everything that I do, everything that I give. So the reason why this bond was never built between the two was because I'm not sure who I'm going to send it to. Am I able to send it to a trainer who is technically qualified, who is a professional, who I can give full-hearted trust to, that he or she will do her job without hurting my patient? I mean, now that's possible. Of course, I've got a whole list of trainers that I know that I'll send out to if I know what they're capable of. But I don't think that is possible with the entire industry. You know, where we are, I mean, it is improving, but we are not there yet. So even when I've questioned this with my superiors, like, why aren't we doing this? We have an entire team of allied health out there who can do what we are trying to do in probably in a better manner, a more holistic manner, a more one-to-one basis. You know, there is more individuality, more specificity. You know, your patients are not getting just some random template program that's probably not going to help them in the long run. Maybe the first 3 months, and that's about it. And then what? You know, so we have that issue. There is that issue. There is that issue that we are trying to prescribe exercise, but it's incomplete. I know it's incomplete, but my hands are tied. Because if I have 10 patients a day, times 5 times a week, times 4 times a month, that's a lot of patients. So I need my allied health team, but I need the allied health team to be up to speed. You need to be trustable. I need to be able to send my client to you or my patient to you without worrying if anything is going to go wrong. So I should be able to tell, oh, you have a knee injury, this is your condition, go to your trainer, tell them this, they will know exactly what to do. Regress, progress, whatever you need to do, change the exercise program based on what the condition is. Or I will probably give like, okay, these are a set of things that you probably should avoid, and your trainer should know the rest. That's probably where I would want to go with.
What happens now then if, let's say, a situation were to arise and there are differences of methodologies of approaches? If, let's say, a passive rest was prescribed by a doctor versus an active form of rehab or recovery prescribed by their coaches, from a perspective of a client and also a trainer, which methodology should we adopt?
Whichever is prevailing, as in the literature. Like, we know literature says that you have, like, if you've got an ACL injury, you can't straight away start exercising. Yeah. No matter how well you feel, there are things that you can't do because of other factors, like, you know, like graft health and those kind of things. Yeah. But for an ankle injury, if someone tells you to rest for 2 weeks, you can look up anywhere in Google. It doesn't say that. All the current rehab protocols will tell you 3 to 5 days of rest. That's the max you get. And you got to start moving. So if there is evidence that this protocol exists, it means there is a way to rehab through this, through a consensus that's been established, then that should be the one that should guide the client's treatment. So if a doctor is giving a protocol or a treatment advice that's against the consensus, that itself is actually one of the biggest problems we are dealing with from the medical side. We have people giving information that's outdated. So it goes back to what I was saying earlier. If you go to the right person for the particular treatment, you're likely to get a more precise advice, and we are less likely to have a clash of understanding or clash of how we're going to treat this client. But if you have differences in opinion, like in between you want to do a hack squat and I want to do a leg press, I think that's a small matter. Yeah, that's more of a preference more than what is a prevailing consensus. So I think that should be established. We should be on the same page when it comes to what is the general consensus, but how you do each one of those phases, especially when it comes to the active parts, that is something that we can mix and match based on what your preference is or what it's available to you.
Prior to this, I believe it's quite common for all of at least for myself, that whatever the healthcare professional advises, that's the guideline that I'll adopt. But up to around a certain point when my professional opinion will start thinking, hey, it's already a considerable amount of time. Passive rest can only do so much, but beyond that, some form of active recovery has to take precedence.
Exactly. I would say that your knowledge on that is probably going to be as good as or better than what a regular doctor will know. But say that doctor, we are the one who's handling a client together. Then chances are both of us will be on the same page most of the time. Besides, maybe there are some salient points that I might have to highlight if there's something else going on. Okay. But other than that, if it's just something that is not really a hazardous, not really a very critical injury, something that's trivial, then probably we won't have that much differing opinions. But if it's a critical injury, then probably there are other things that you are not seeing that I'm seeing. And that's where us communicating becomes important. So yeah, that hence why this bond has to be established, because there are probably some things you don't see, and only the eyes will see what the mind knows. So likewise, there are probably some things you see at times that I don't see, because you deal with the clients more. If you deal with the client 3 times a week and I see the client 2 months once, chances are you're going to have much more information than me. So sometimes having your eyes on that particular point will also help me. Hence why I think this bond in the long run is going to help.
All right. Now I'm going back to the part where I mentioned about scope of practice. So as a personal trainer, as a fitness professional, I think the objective is pretty simple, to get a client from point A to point B. But I think execution-wise can be quite messy. As a fitness professional in general, it seems like there's a lot of gray area. Yes, frequency plays a huge portion, like what you mentioned. We observe a lot more. But how can we clear off some of that gray area and be really definitive and really clear on our scope of practice?
As a fitness professional.
Correct.
I think the first thing that I think every fitness professional has to understand is be the master of your own art first. It's not just counting repetitions and a bunch of sets and repetitions, The scope of a fitness professional is actually huge. I mean, I've been in the industry for 18 years. Until today, I'm still learning. And if I can still learn till this point, and if someone who comes with 3 years experience in the industry, and they're starting to be like a rehab, they're starting to do like rehab courses and starting to do like massage courses, I'm like, where are you going with this? Because the scope of a fitness professional is so scientific and is ever growing, ever evolving. There's just so much to learn and so much to perfect. And every client poses as a different challenge. Every client will test your principles from a different angle. Is not every client, this particular principle is going to work. How do you determine that? What kind of experience do you have to be able to delineate this client works with this method, this client works with this method, this client works with this method, this client can't do this exercise. So there is just so many variables that you have to think about as a fitness professional. And your knowledge on that has to keep evolving, and you have to saturate yourself with as much knowledge as you can about your field first. And trust me, 5 years is not enough. Like before I became a doctor, it's 5 years of learning from a medical school. And even the day when I stepped out, I'm still fearful. 2 years into working, I'm still fearful. And here I am 11 years as a doctor, and I'm still going back to my books, going back to my literature, understanding my art. And I wouldn't say the fitness professional field is any different. It's a field that is so big. And you just being good at what you are right now is going to be able to funnel you with a lot of funding, a lot of income, just knowing and being good at what you do.
I agree on the part where you mentioned that it's larger than what we think. So when I was sharing with my colleagues, we had a common understanding where our task is not really to get rid of the gray area and to just practice within what we are comfortable, our safe zone. But it's to be really comfortable enough to recognize, even within the gray areas itself, where our boundaries are, and we recognize beyond that, we might need to seek help. I'd like to move on to, with an abundance of courses out there, certs here over a weekend course, it feels like we can do everything the moment we attend any form of weekend course. Clearly, in your standing, is it true?
No, of course not. Like if you have seen the things that I teach, like my workshop, it's normally about hypertrophy. You don't see me teaching anything else. You don't see me trying to do anything else. That's because, have you put yourself through the mill and challenge yourself against another person's opinion on that matter, and you've been able to defend your points with the current evidence that is around there, So why I've honed into hypertrophy is because the field is huge and it's immensely scientific, but not without the experience and the hard work. So being good, I've told myself this: if I'm going to be good at something, I've got to know everything that I can possibly learn about it. The information that I've churned out from my first workshop and my 15th workshop has changed. Because there's much more information, there are newer papers, there's questions that were actually brought up by the participants that made me question some of the things I've thought about. And with that, the mastering of the art, is getting better and better throughout the time. So likewise for a trainer, I know it's exciting to have a resume that's filled with all kinds of certs you have earned, but does any one of that mean anything? Ask yourself, Are you sure you're an expert? You sure you want to go down this road? Because it could be a rabbit hole that you can't climb out of. Like, I did a massage course before. Trust me, I've done sports massage. Never practiced it once. Because I've already had so many things on my plate. I know it's fun to know, but I'll never put it in my resume because I'm not a sports massage therapist. I basically went for that course to understand what happens in a sports massage. That's it. Is because I'm a sports physician. Okay, so why I went for that course? I'm a sports physician. And say you come with an injury. I know sports massage may help you. But if I have no idea what sports massage is about, how am I about to tell you how to, please go and do sports massage, it'll help you. Like, that was the only reason I wanted to learn that thing. And I felt the books wasn't giving me enough. I needed to learn from someone who's been doing this for so long and getting their point of view. It's basically getting their experience into my knowledge base. That's it. Like nutrition. You'll never see me talking too much about nutrition. I never dive deep into it. I can, but I don't because I'm not a dietitian. That is not my field of practice. I know a little bit. It takes me off when people do information that's very misinformative and no one is saying something about it. But at the end of the day, there's only so much I can say because beyond that, it's not my scope of practice. So I know a little bit. So I will tell my clients, oh yeah, these are the things you should be eating, but don't ask me to write you a diet plan. If you really need a diet plan, I'll refer you to someone who's a dietitian, a registered dietitian who's doing this as a living, who's going to be able to give you a more robust information, like a prescription of what you should be eating, on how you should be eating. And probably the knowledge they know is probably 4-5 folds more than what I know. It's interesting to know for yourself, but to call yourself an expert after 2 days of learning something, I don't think so. You know?
Yeah, it's quite interesting when you mention that because it is common for a client to expect that, oh yeah, my trainer will be able to provide me with a meal plan.
Are we trying to be a one-stop center?
I hope not.
So I don't think trainers should start thinking they are a one-stop center.
When a client of a special population category walks in, be it any of the metabolic diseases, hypertensive, etc., or anyone with a particular pain or injury, what is one or a few good rule of thumbs that you'd want all fitness professionals to practice or to be mindful of, and any particular guidelines that you'd like them to adhere to?
Well, that's a very good question. I'm not sure whether you guys have heard of this. This questionnaire called Physical Activity Readiness Questionnaire. It's called a PARQ. I think if you're getting a new client who has said comorbidities, hypertension, diabetes, or whatsoever it is, doing the PARQ questionnaire is a very good starting point. Because there are questions like, have you had cardiac issues in the past? Have you had chest pain in the past? Have you had any dizziness causing you to fall in the past? Are you on any chronic medications in the past or currently? Or has your doctor told you that you need to be exercising with supervision? All of these are major red flags. So if your client checks out one of those red flags, it's not saying that you can't train the client, but the client needs a medical clearance first to be safe to exercise. Because the last thing you need is for someone to collapse in front of you and you not knowing what to do. You don't have a crash kit in your gym. You know, you can't intubate the person is required. Okay? So, and I have seen horror stories happen. Not the fault of the trainer, but you know, it's something that could have happened to anyone. It's just so happened it happened to that trainer. You know? Regardless, I would say that PARQ questionnaire would actually, I think it should be done with every client that you get. No matter how safe you think that client is, just do it. Just do it as an entry assessment. Why? It keeps you safe, it keeps the client safe. Okay? And with that being said, if say something flags, okay, and you send the client for a clearance, okay, and say I'm the physician who's attending, I see the client, and I say, of course, the client has history of a heart attack before. Then what I would probably do, I'll probably take the client, do a bunch of blood works, do an ECG, do a stress test. I'll say, okay, Peng Hooi, looks like the client has ECG changes at a level 5 intensity. Okay, when the heart rate goes past 170, I'm starting to see some changes in the cardiac ECG. Yeah. Okay, so this client is not fit for high intensity exercise. Let's start with something that's low to moderate first, because that doesn't seem to trigger the heart problem. Okay, so you being the trainer, now you know you have that information. You know, so I will say that at beyond 170 beats per minute, it looks like those changes. So you keep the client say within 155 beats at all times. with adequate rest periods and so on and so forth to make sure they don't exceed. Maybe you don't do supersets or giant sets or extremely heavy workouts to make sure that the heart rate stays within that. Then 3 months down the road or 6 months down the road, we repeat the stress test. And maybe that clears up. The client's blood parameters works out better, sugar control is better, hypertension control is better. Then I will tell you, looks like the client is better, you can bump it up. So that way you are safe, client is safe, no one has to go to the hospital for unnecessary reasons.
I'd like to jump to the part where I think I get a rough sense of where your stance is on it. Supplementation. Where does a trainer's role end or start?
If you do CSCS, for instance, okay, CSCS is the Strength and Conditioning Cert. There are a bunch of rules in there when it comes, and they're very strict about that in America. You're only able to advise someone about supplementations. You cannot prescribe. That means I cannot tell you, please start taking creatine, monohydrate, 5 grams a day, as long as you're training with me. Okay? What you can say is, with the current evidence there is, creatine monohydrate seems to be a very effective and safe supplement that can enhance your power, your endurance, your strength, and your hypertrophic gains, and it's been shown to be effective for brain and bone as well. It's probably a good supplement you could consider if you think it will help you. So basically, I'm saying the same thing, but I am making it less pushy and more of, I'm giving you the information, you do what you want with it. Likewise, I will tell you, like, protein intake is very important. You should be getting about 1.5 to 1.7 grams per kg. Okay? But it seems like you're not being able to hit with your normal diet. So I would suggest that maybe getting a protein shake might help you meet your targets. But you cannot say, please go and buy ON, Whey Gold, this flavor, this. No, you can't. You can tell them these are probably the brands out there that is legitimate. These are the good ones, which are probably like third-party tested. You know that the content is good. There's no banned substance in them as a trainer. So this is you giving your professional advice. But you cannot prescribe them. You cannot tell them, go to GNC and buy this.
I believe here within our coaches itself, the common consensus that we have is it doesn't start or begin. Supplementation period is a role that, as long as a client is asking whether they should be on or they should be off a certain supplementation, it is never the role of a trainer that would say, yes, you should go on, yes, you should go off.
Yes.
It's always referred to your physician.
When it comes to like musculoskeletal performance, I would trust my trainer.
Oh dear.
Okay? Because the doctors already have a ton of medications that we have to understand. Trust me, like pharmacology class was a nightmare. Okay? Knowing a list of antibiotics, a list of pain medications, a list of this medication, muscle relaxants, sleep medication, antidepressants, whatnot. There's a whole list of things I already have to know. And understanding how creatine monohydrate works is not in the top 10 of my list. Okay? So the first thing they will know is creatine monohydrate. Creatinine is the byproduct. That's what we see in people with kidney failure. Creatine is bad. No one has actually gone to look at the literature that Darren Kendall has written and said that creatine is extremely safe. It's a byproduct of natural meat eating. If you eat meat, you get creatine. How is supplementation going to be dangerous? So the thing is, your doctor has not gone and sat down and read the literature because there's a gazillion other things for me to know. You asking me about creatine monohydrate is not anywhere in my list sometimes. Okay? So likewise, whey protein. Because their understanding is too much whey protein or too much protein has caused kidney issues. Okay? But the context of that was in people who already had kidney issues, not in people with healthy kidneys. But again, did they go read that paper? No, they didn't. So when you put them on the spot, you'll be like, I'm probably going to give you the safest advice. Don't take it. Safest advice, because if you don't take it, nothing is going to happen. If you take it and something happens, then it's my problem. So as a trainer, you being in the field, learning about this, knowing some things about it, you probably have read far more about nutrition in perspective of like performance and musculoskeletal physical health and so on and so forth. You probably will have, you are in the position to have the best information. Okay? But you also must understand you are not able to prescribe because that is not your, legally that's not your scope. But in this scenario, you're probably the person who has the best understanding of that and probably can convey the best advice. So it all goes down to how you frame your words. And if you frame it in the right perspective with the right set of information given to your client, you're probably going to be more beneficial than the doctor itself. You know, I'm not going to go to the doctor and ask, is HMB good? They wouldn't know. Is BCAA good? They wouldn't know. Like why you should be consuming BCAA, why you shouldn't be even bothering with BCAA. They don't know that. All they know is BCAA is an essential amino acid. So that nuance, that understanding of the depth of what research has spoken about it, no, doctors don't know that. I would probably know because I'm a sports physician. It's part of ergogenic aids. But even then, I've taken special interest into that. So I learn every nook and corner about that thing. I wouldn't say that about all sports physicians.
So now we're going to move on to the how for today's theme. So patient and clients' well-being, health, and goals are the effective common grounds that I guess both parties can agree on that, this is where we need to serve. So as a practitioner of both, how do you think we can ensure that a patient or a client benefits from the most appropriate care by involving both parties?
I think firstly, the bond between the two of us has to be established. I think that's like the baseline. There must be an established bond that's there. And of course, with that bond comes the trust. That means I should be able to trust that you will know what you're doing, and you should be able to trust that I will know what I'm doing, and we are less likely to clash with each other. So when it comes for the care, say for instance, we're talking with a patient who has polycystic ovary. Okay, then we know that it's a gynecological problem with a whole host of metabolic issues. And now we know exercise is a very important intervention in getting hold of that condition. So me as a doctor, I should be looking into the blood parameters. Okay, these are things that are not right. So like too much androgens, blood glucose all over the place, HbA1c is high, fasting insulin is high, and so on and so forth. Okay. So in my host of interventions, the first intervention is lifestyle intervention, which is where the dietitian comes in. It means improving the diet, okay, getting them on a slight deficit, okay, will be the first step there. The second step is to start exercising. As a doctor, I should be able to say, of course, this is with the context that the client actually can afford a trainer. So of course, I can give general advice, please go and exercise, start walking, do some resistance training. But if a client can actually afford a trainer to get more precise information, I would of course say, please hire a trainer to be able to give you a more individualistic exercise protocol or exercise regime that is progressed through the time so that you meet the criteria of being an exercise being moderate to vigorous in order to see changes in PCOS, which that's where the research is going, because it's moderate to vigorous intensity exercise that actually makes the biggest changes in their weight, their fat content, their free androgen index, and so on and so forth. And the combination with the diet actually allows them to get hold of their disease better, improve fertility rates. So for me to be able to do that, I need a team. So I need, as a sports physician, I would like the gynecological team to know what they're doing. Then the dietitians to know what they're doing. Okay. Then my trainers to know what they're doing. So when I have all this information and you can see the overall outcome of the client is actually improving. Being someone who can do both, I know I can't split myself into two. I can't try to handle the exercise and I can't try to handle the disease as well. Being able to trust my allied health friends, who are my trainers in this case, and knowing that, okay, if they go to this particular place, they're more likely to get very good advice suited to their needs and their goals. And both of us, as physicians and trainers, will be able to make the outcome or get the best outcome for our client/patient. Same thing that goes for a diabetic. You need clearance from me to make sure that the client is actually safe enough to exercise in the community, But I should know that you understand diabetes to a certain extent to know that there are things you can do, things you can't do, what are the red flags you got to look out for if anything is going wrong. Like for instance, if the client is a diabetic and is on a beta blocker, okay, and they have hypertension, so when they're on a beta blocker, what happens here is, if they have hypoglycemic symptoms, the beta blocker prevents any of the symptoms to come out. Because the anxiety, the cold sweats, all of these are adrenergic signs and symptoms. The beta blocker effectively stops that from happening. So you can't see that. So now you have a client who's diabetic and is also on a beta blocker. You have more things to look out for. And if you're willing to take someone with this kind of chronic illness, probably you have to go a step further. They probably have to do a blood glucose before they exercise with you. If they come in with a blood glucose of 5, chances are after you exercise, they're going to faint. So there must be a minimum for you. So you understand that. So I should be able to trust that you have the basic understanding that if this client has diabetes, these are things I have to look out for. If this client is on this particular medication, the doctor has told me that these are things can happen. These are things I have to look out for as a trainer. Again, that's a step further. You're dealing with someone with chronic illness. So every client will have different challenges that you as a trainer should be able to understand and probably get the information from the doctor as well. And likewise, what you're doing, I should be able to trust that you know exactly what you're doing. I don't have to tell you what to do. Where I'm going with this is my aim in the medical world is to be able to have health professionals like the fitness trainers for me to trust that they can do what they're doing without me needing to micromanage everything. I don't want to be overseeing that. I should be able to trust you that you know what you're doing. Yeah.
This is one of a very interesting problem, simply the problem of the communication between the two, because it benefits the one party that will benefit most from it, which is client or patients. It's a problem that we recognize that it will be better if we are more communicative, but it also serves as a good starting point, recognizing that we are patient-centric or client-centric, that because of them, we should and we must build that trust, that bond, so that we can improve better service, improve better care for them. So the way I see Healthcare Alliance is, it forms somewhat of a spectrum. You have your fitness professional on one end, you have your doctors on another. Where do you think the roles of a fitness professional ends and begins across this said spectrum?
I would say that for fitness professionals, it's pretty simple. If someone is fit enough to exercise in the community without medical supervision, then training or exercise per se should be the role of the fitness professional. Okay? Now, when it comes to disease state or preventive care and so on, okay? With preventive care, I think there's a shared effort between the fitness professionals and the healthcare, because there are elements to their health that requires a healthcare professional to give the advice, and there are parts to their health that requires a fitness professional to give the advice. But in the case of a disease state, say for instance, an ACL injury, okay? So the treatment and the rehabilitation of someone who has an ACL injury is beyond the scope of a fitness professional.
Yes.
You understand? Until and unless I tell that this person is fit to go back and start training in community. Okay? That means you are able to go back to the gym and do exercises that are more intense. Then it's even beyond the scope of a physiotherapist. Okay? Because the physiotherapist is getting you from point A to point B, but from point B to point C is where you're going to a performance. And that's where the trainers come in, the SNC comes in. So that's where your job starts. So probably the first 6 months is not your role. Beyond that 6 months becomes your role. So there is effectively that you also need to understand how this disease state works, especially the musculoskeletal injuries. But there are other areas in the fitness world or the medical world that where it all happens together. Like for instance, knee osteoarthritis. Okay, the elderly who's trying to exercise. So your role is important, but my role is equally important. For me to explain to the client or the patient that your disease state is not bad enough for you to be sitting at home or walking around in a wheelchair or moving around in a wheelchair. You should be exercising, but you need to get a proper exercise regimen or advice from said fitness professional, because they have dealt with clients like this. They know exactly what is going to be able to get you off your chair, able to walk independently without any issues and improve your state. So eventually what happens is, with time, my job slowly fades off, because you are getting, as a fitness professional, you're aiding them into becoming more independent. And eventually my job as a doctor is to give them the right advice, to put them on the right path, to make sure that they understand that we can slow down this process, but we can't stop it altogether. But you as a fitness professional have gotten them from not being able to walk, to walking, to performing at their level, at their age. So they can probably play with their kids, play with their grandkids, and so on and so forth without needing the aid. And eventually what happens is everything that we have taught them goes into maintenance. I would see them once a year, once in 6 months, and you would probably see them longer. And at some point you also have to let them go. You can't keep holding their client for the next 5 years. So you probably have them till you have taught them everything that they need to know from the exercise standpoint. And they have gone to a point where they are physically better off, and then both our job is done.
If I were to just summarize that whole healthcare alliance or spectrum, both parties need to support that for a client's sake, for whatever goals or pains or injuries that they're facing. The more guidance or the advices that from a medical perspective and also a fitness perspective, both works hand in hand. It starts from someone like yourself, a doctor, who might see a patient once a month or once every 2 months to a point where it becomes less dependent on you. Then they will have to rely on the fitness professional to at least guide them through and make them, in some ways, observe and keep them accountable to it. And then only then they can slowly, from not walking to running and start performing and be able to enjoy the subtleties in life with family and etc. Just to wrap things up based from our conversation today, I think some of the biggest takeaways that we received are that, for one, if at any time, whenever in doubt, go with whatever that's most prevailing and a very general consensus from the science or the community as a whole on what is perceived as the right methods to approach. And so it's just so that for both parties that, okay, this is the right way to move forward. This will be the best solution that we can adopt for our client or patient. And the next biggest thing that I actually took away from this is that for trust to be established, I need to know that whatever that I prescribe to my client, whatever I give to my client, advice or any form of information, that itself needs some form of a governing body or a certification that says that, okay, I have the sufficient knowledge to give that said information or that said advice without harming the other party as a whole. And this buys my ticket into the Healthcare Alliance, because now I know that from a perspective of all the other healthcare professionals, I'm regarded as someone that's safe in my practice and will not practice outside of my scope. And the last thing is, I like how you mentioned the fact that what are the few good rule of thumbs that we need to have as a whole is whenever we deal with a client that we recognize that, the PARQ itself is not clear. There are some conditions that they might have, some issues that they might be facing. Okay, I need them to obtain some form of medical clearance. And in addition to that, I think it's also a good opportunity for whenever those circumstances arise, is for a fitness professional to just reach out. You're going to get your medical clearance from so-and-so. Can I also reach out? Can I have his contact, a medical professional's contact to say, hey, I'll be working alongside with this new client of mine who happens to be a patient of yours. Are there some of the things that I should take note of, or some form of guidelines that you should give?
With social media, things have gotten, I think, a little easier when it comes to contacting the person and speaking to the person. And I feel like go in the right direction. I mean, I've gotten a few trainers who's already speaking to me. I'm dealing with their clients, but they are also the trainers of that said patient, So that makes I enjoy that relationship we have. It's like basically like that patient is diabetic, okay, and I've done a set of tests, and I've done a couple of investigations, so on and so forth. And this patient is safe to exercise. Then I go on. The trainer does whatever they need to do with the exercise and the training and whatsoever. 6 months later, patient comes back to me. I do a bunch of blood tests. I say, wow, there's a lot of improvement. Your muscle mass is better, your blood glucose control is better, so on and so forth. We can actually drop down the medications required for them. So patient is happy that patient is getting better. Patient is also happy with the trainer, which also allows you to renew the client, which helps you too. So in that way, we have a bond that actually benefits all three parties. Hopefully with with this current understanding, we have more and more physicians who are willing to listen to trainers. Instead of, sadly speaking, there's a lot of looking down, okay, which I totally disagree with. But as I said, the industry itself did not help itself with a lot of people being unqualified. But the moment you are qualified, the moment you have set standards that you have put for yourself, then you start being at par with most people, and then you start being seen as, brothers in battle rather than I'm the commander and you are the, yeah.
And my last biggest takeaway was that across the health spectrum of a patient or client, both individuals, we recognize that whether we want a bridge to be built or otherwise, the health spectrum itself have already incorporated both healthcare professionals and fitness professionals. It's either we recognize it earlier and we can help our patient or clients in a better position or not. That's the only question that we have. But that to me it's my biggest takeaway, that there is already a bridge that connects us. Our patient or client is the common factor that we have. And it's now literally up to both healthcare and fitness professionals to find a way to re-establish some form of trust and build a bond between the two. Before we part ways, Arvin, do you have any last words that you might want to have for our coaches and all movers?
I would say that, you guys are already in the right direction. Is just my biggest advice to trainers, being a trainer myself, is be really good at what you do. Take time to improve your knowledge, improve your experience, learn from others. Again, learning from others doesn't mean you're going to get everything right. Okay? You must also know how to sieve your points. Okay? There are some things that are probably going to be advantages to you, some things that are probably beyond the scope of your practice. You probably might not know it or might not need it, but it's good to know. Being that person who's always pushing yourself to be slightly better than the person you was yesterday or the day before yesterday is going to make you more advanced in the field. And always something that I tell to all the trainers that I've taught is you have to look at yourself and ask yourself this question: 10 years from now, where am I going to be? Who am I going to be? And how important am I going to be in the industry? Okay? Are you one of those trainers who later on goes on to become some other person? Or is this going to be a job for the next foreseeable future? If that is the case, then what are you doing to make sure that you're moving up the ladder? What are you doing to make sure that you are going to be a prominent figure? You are going to be me someday. I won't be doing this for too long. Okay? At some point, there will be another person who's going to be calling themselves as a hypertrophy expert. So if you have some goals like that, then you have to start building your base. And as for our bond between the healthcare professionals and the trainers, start establishing one. Because you are the one who's actually dealing with more amount of clients than we ever know which clients are actually going to trainers. We don't know. So by asking your clients, like you say they have diabetes or whatever it is, like probably can you get some advices from your doctor? That's probably some things I can look out for. Okay, how your blood glucose control is. How was it in the last 6 months? We've trained together for the last 6 months. Was there improvement? Because that fortifies your understanding or your knowledge that you have done what is right for the client, and the client seeing improvements. How do you know that? You don't know that because you don't see a bunch of blood results saying that, hey, I've actually done a good job. The client's actually improving. My advices for the client seem to be working, and the client's actually getting better. And the doctor should know that. The doctor should know, said trainer has been working with this client and improving the outcomes. We should be clapping hands for you because you're helping the client. You're making our jobs better. So sometimes it's good to know who was that person in the shadow that was there. And if there's more of them, it's better for us. The hospitals are already crowded. I'll be very happy to deload some. So we need more of you guys to help us with that and take people out of medications and more into preventive care, and the industry is endless.
Okay, so I believe our coaches here at Move have benefited very much from this very dialogue session. And we are going to start practicing the tips and guidelines that Dr. Arvin has just shared with us today, especially on building a better functioning relationship between healthcare and fitness professionals. Also, for our client to ensure that they go through a more meaningful experience and journey in their personal breakthrough journeys. So once again, thank you, Dr. Arvin.
Thank you, man.